criteria that most of the donors are going to ask for. And of course, this list is not complete. There are others too, but years in operation. Do you have an active board? That's pretty self-evident, and you can't do anything about that but tough it out. After another year, you'll be 1 year older, and then that's it. Keep an eye, by the way. If you looked at a certain website and it said you've got to be around for 3 years, and you're 6 months away from being around for 3 years, put it on your calendar. Come back in 6 months. Don't just forget about it. An active board of directors. Now, why does a donor want to know about or care about whether or not you have an active board of directors? It's very simple. The board of directors is supposed to provide oversight. Are you functioning with efficiency? Are you functioning with integrity? They're putting their own, these are usually, business people, successful people. They're putting their own names and reputations on the line for your organization. They want to make sure that it's legally compliant with all filing and tax requirements and so on. So board of directors are important from the standpoint of a donor because of that oversight. And don't overlook the fact that a board of directors is important in and of itself because successful business people can probably provide you with access to their circle of fellow successful business people, which is a wonderful way to raise funds, and B, because they can provide you with valuable business knowledge, business experience, expertise, maybe access to to personnel, maybe access to volunteers, and that's a whole other subject in itself. We've got a whole course sequence on board of director development, but it is a fact that this is something that many donors look for. Neighborhoods, population served. Again, it's pretty self-evident. Your local franchise for whatever, Starbucks, let's say, if they're providing funds through the local franchise, is going to be interested in somebody in their neighborhood. Don't go to the one 6 miles away. That doesn't make any sense. Sound fiscal controls, audits. I mean, you probably are all aware of these various compliance requirements, many of which have some form of paperwork associated with them, and you will be asked to produce that paperwork. Obviously you've got to have it all in order, because if you don't, at some point somebody will come and shut you down. But a good reason to be timely with this kind of thing is because if you're not, you're just going to be missing out on available funding. You could apply for one extension after another, to file your taxes, and it's perfectly legal to do that, provided you get around to it at some point. But in the meantime, if somebody says, "Can I have your 2008 tax return?" and we're standing here in 2010, you'll say, "I'm going to get to it soon." In the first place, they're probably not going to have a warm feeling about your efficiency, and in the second place, if you can't produce the paperwork, don't bother to apply. So that's all. That's all pretty important. Go where you want it. That's the important rule. Mission. We'll talk more about mission as we go on, but as we alluded earlier, it's basically what you started your organization for, or what the founders of the organization started it for, what it is that you do, and that has to mesh with what the funder is interested in providing money for. Programs offered, and some funders are very specific. Yes, I'm interested in education, but I'm interested in after-school athletic programs. I'm not interested in tutoring. It's just why? I don't know. That's just the way it is. So if they are specific, you need to find out just how specific they are, and grant specific criteria that could be really, anything under the sun. It's something as silly as your founder's last name has to begin with W. What are some of the documentation requirements that the funder will be asking for? I'm not talking about just those things that we were mentioning before. But these are again additional legalities that you ought to be fulfilling anyway. What's your charter, certificate of incorporation? A nonprofit needs to be a formal corporate kind of organization, an entity in and of itself, before almost anybody will provide any funding for it. In order to actually legally go out and ask people to give you money and enable them to use that money as as a tax deduction. You have to be certified not only as an organization, but as a nonprofit organization, which is called 501(c), as I'm positive all of you know. But you've got to go through a process to obtain a 501(c). It's important that you have a mission statement. Now, this is not a requirement in the same sense that a 501(c) is a requirement, but it's very nice if you articulate in your grant proposal that we really, really believe in providing top-notch home-based senior care. But somebody will go to your website and hopefully you have a website, or look at your literature or whatever, and they're going to want to read there independently, what your organization is all about. So if your website, talks about your after-school program, and you're applying for a grant that addresses home-based senior care, there's a little bit of a dissonance over there, a disconnect. Hey, wait a minute, what are these guys? Did they just put on a different hat depending on who's giving out the money? It's perfectly valid for an organization to be involved in many different things, but that's got to be apparent in what they've set out to do. And in general, you should really, and I'm talking to a room full of people who are mostly from smaller nonprofits, you shouldn't bite off more than you can chew. It's especially important in times when there isn't a ton of money floating around, to identify what it is that you do best and what it is that's most needed in your particular area of service, and really focus on that. That may mean cutting out some services too. In better times, diversity is a little bit more feasible, but a funder is going to want to see that you do have some kind of an overall vision, focus, what we typically call a mission statement, and it ought to show up in a place other than just your proposal to them. They want to see that that's something you believe and are telling everybody, not just them. Okay, we spoke about financial filings and the 501(c) documentation, the audits. You look at the offering for the grant, and you say, okay, when's it due? Oh, end of January. I've got 2 weeks. That's fine. And then it's the last week of January, and you say, I've got a few days. It's fine. And then you read it in detail. And you say, I have an important question that I need answered before I can finish this grant proposal. And then you read the fine print, and it said that the deadline for asking questions was last week. Happens all the time. So be aware that there are maybe several layers of deadline over there. And then from a practical standpoint, it's just a fact of life. Until you're actually in it and start writing it, you're not going to know the questions that are going to occur to you until you've gone through that request for grant proposals in detail and have really absorbed it. You're not going to know what questions are going to occur to you. So it's a good general advice for life, but it's especially important when you're writing a grant proposal, or for that matter in business, any kind of proposal. If it's due at the end of January, set a mental deadline for yourself 2 or 3 weeks earlier. It's really due the 15th of January. And Murphy's Law will almost always, pop up, and you'll find that you may actually need that extra time. And that'll be the difference between being able to get it in and not being able to get it in. Internal review is an important thing also. People tend to become, enamored of something that they've written themselves. Ooh, this is so beautiful. It's perfect. It's wonderful. Second, when you write something yourself, you tend to overlook simple, even obvious errors. You just left out a word. You give it to somebody else to read, and in the first place, and it's somebody who knows what they're talking about, preferably a colleague in your organization who knows what you're talking about. They'll say, that paragraph is unmitigated drivel. It sounds terrible. Rewrite it, or you left out a word here. That kind of thing is just, a second set of eyes is always, generally a good thing. And if you want to add a third set of eyes, that's even better. And as we said, it's got to go from here to there. And so you've got to allow enough time to actually do that. Not a good idea, unless you've already done this like a million times before, to just sit down and start writing. If you've done it a million times before, you can get away with a lot of things. But otherwise, you really should start off with an outline first. In fact, as I'm going to say, you should really create an outline and use that as your template for most of your grant proposals. And have a clear idea, and it helps to write it down on paper. The advent of computers and word processing makes this a very creative and organic process. You don't have to sit there and write it down and cross that anymore. I know I'm dating myself, but in the old days, it was rather painful. You always need revisions, but now you can sort of start brainstorming, and these are all points that are going to appear in a certain structure in your ultimate grant proposal, but get them down and save them separately, and they are recyclable. Don't forget. What are you going to use the funds for? Everybody in this room is sitting here saying, "Oh my gosh, we need money," and I'm 100% sure that it's true. But in and of itself, that statement's not going to cut it with anybody. So, what do you need the funds for? And of course, as we said earlier, specifically to the interests of this particular grantor, what do I need the funds for? I'm running a program to give remedial education to kids after school. And I need the funds to pay rent for the room, to pay for the tutors, to buy and maintain the computer equipment that's needed for that, to pay my electric bill, and the phone bill, and the internet bill, and so on and so forth. Really, really specific. What do you need the funds for? If it's a service that's driven by a need that can't be predicted, then the funder will definitely cut you some slack. And again, you're a new startup organization, so it's obviously particularly true for you. But suppose you've been providing after-school remedial tutoring for the past 3 years. You have a rough idea how many kids are going to come to you, in this month and that month and the other month, and you make predictions on that basis. Everybody allows you some slack. If you have no idea whether you're going to get 20 kids or 200 kids, so and you have no basis for your projection that you're going to get 200 instead of 20, then they're not going to just give you funds just in case you're going to get 200 kids, or just in case you can't just ask for funds in case the ceiling springs a leak and you're going to need to hire somebody to fix it. There are funders who give funds for general administration and maintenance, although that's becoming less harder and harder to find. Most funders today are saying, I want you to spend the money on this, and that kind of in that kind of a situation, you really have to sit down with somebody who knows how to crunch the numbers and come up with something that's going to be fairly accurate. Most of the funders, and this is a DYCD sponsored session, so you're all familiar with DYCD in some way or another. They have excruciatingly detailed requirements that basically require that you account for every single penny that they've given you in terms of describing how it was spent. That doesn't mean that there's no understanding of something unanticipated, but you've got to explain why it was unanticipated if in fact something like that showed up. Getting all this down and it's okay to start off with a sort of a guesstimate. I think I'll need about $15,000 for such and such, but you can't give the proposal if that's all you have. I mean, you've really got to break it down and be able to credibly back up the numbers that you're going to be presenting in your proposal in detail. Now, why is investing in your organization versus other organizations a wise move for the grantor? I don't mean that you should be putting down other organizations. That's not the point. The point is that for some services, you're obviously not the only one providing that services. Whether it's senior care or remedial education or an AIDS clinic or whatever it may be, there may even be others that are providing it. Maybe in the context of different service mix, but there may be others providing it even in your neighborhood. So you can't say, and it doesn't look good for you to say, we're great, they stink. What you should say instead is what your special focus is. We focus on highly individualized care. We focus particularly on remedial math. We focus particularly on patients from a certain ethnic group or a certain religion or a certain socioeconomic sector. That doesn't mean that you are the one and only in the universe that does that. But if you show that you are addressing a need or emphasizing a need that others are either not addressing or maybe not emphasizing, and the grantor is particularly taken by the fact that you're providing this additional emphasis, it'll stand you in good stead. This is a principle that isn't unique to nonprofits. It's a business principle also. You always, when somebody starts up a business in particular, you always ask them, or their accountant should always ask them, what is your unique selling point? Sometimes it's more important, sometimes it's less important. I'm going to be making and selling undershirts. Well, you don't have to be unique when you're making and selling undershirts. It's a commodity, and I'm going to be selling sugar. Millions of people sell sugar. I'll be another one selling sugar. That's fine. But if you're going to be selling something a little bit higher end, or I'm going to be selling an MP3 player. Okay, that's fine. A lot of people are out there making and selling MP3 players. You will probably fail miserably unless you can demonstrate. We're talking to an investor in this situation, not a funder. Explain to me why people will want to buy yours rather than the other one, because there's already a lot of other ones, and that's common thinking in the business sector and in the nonprofit sector. If you're providing funding for something, and you're talking generally to business people, that's the mindset. Well and good. You're providing after school remedial education, but what's special about you? So I mean that that you definitely have to give that as much thought as you possibly can. Monitoring the success of your proposed program is critical, and it goes hand in hand with providing an accounting for how the money was spent. You can't just say the money was spent hiring 30 tutors, for the past 4 months. Okay, great. But the end result of my providing you funding wasn't supposed to be that we kept tutors off the street. It was supposed to have been that we provided education to kids. Have you developed a mechanism for measuring the difference in the kids when they walked in from when they walked out to from when they walked in? Did you make a difference in somebody's life? Did you actually help somebody? That's what they're giving you the money for, and not to perpetuate your organization. So it's good to say that, and I'm sure everybody in this room feels that and believes that. But I think you'll all benefit from figuring out a way to actually measure it. And it's not only useful for a proposal, by figuring out ways to develop metrics for success, you can actually improve your services. So it's a good and useful thing to have anyway. And these days, when you're applying for a grant, it's very, very, very important. Especially, a lot of these funders are ones you're going to want to come back to every year, or every 2 years, every 3 years, however, whatever their cycle is for allowing you to reapply. If you make a good case and they fund you, but you haven't been able to demonstrate afterwards, the money spent, they're not going to ask for it back, it's fine, but afterwards they're going to come and say, what difference do we make in the lives of individuals or in the well-being of a community, and you can't quantify it in some way with some hard data. It's going to be very hard for you to come back and say, well, let's this was fun, let's just do it again, right? Knowing that 40 kids in this neighborhood are now much more likely to be able to attend college having gone through the program that they funded than otherwise, it'll make a difference to them. And if you're lucky, the funder will actually feature you and brag about you on their website. And you can't ask for better publicity than that. We'll talk about PR as we will later on. Somebody else, talking about your successes and singing your praises is definitely the best kind of PR. Okay, so we spoke about creating an outline. What should the outline look like? So very often you don't have a choice. More and more these days, there are these online submission forms. Give me a mission statement, 500 words. Give me the specific program that you want the money for, 2,000 words. If you're one letter over, just forget it. It isn't going to fly. I've been there and done it. It's extremely frustrating. But as I said before, it is what it is. If you don't already know, then you look into it. But Microsoft Word and pretty much all the word processing programs have a little tool in Tools called Word Count. It's amazing, and in fact, it's one of those you can't live without it kind of things. When you're doing an online submission thing. So as I say, in my second point over here. Always use an offline word processing tool like Word or whatever your favorite tool is to write this stuff up. This is not an IT class, but I'll say it anyway. Save frequently, and use the word count tool in Word if you want to just count the words in a specific section rather than the whole document. You highlight that section by dragging over it. Tools, word count, there it all is for you. And then we should hopefully all know how to cut and paste. Do not make the mistake ever of trying to actually type into the online web form, because if your browser crashes, you'll be extremely angry and frustrated, and there'll be nothing you can do about it. There's no backups when you're typing into a browser, but when you're typing into a word processing program, it'll back up things for you automatically, and of course you'll be hopefully frequently saving your information yourself. Now, in terms of okay, fine, they're allowing me to use my imagination and create my proposal in however I think is best. So as I said before, your best bet is to create a template that you're going to be using all the time. I always start up with something like, Nonprofit Help Desk is pleased to respond to your grant proposal request for, and I'm specific, because many times, especially the larger organizations, will have several different things that you could be applying for grants for at the same time. So say exactly what. Just like when you're applying for a job, you don't just say, hey, I'm applying for that job. What job? If it's a large company, they could have had many requisitions for jobs out there. Same thing is true when you're applying for a grant request. The next thing in your template generally should be a brief history of your organization. We were founded back in 1987 by Mrs. So-and-so, who was really bothered by the prevalence of drug dealers in the neighborhood, and the rest is history, but you have to say what the rest is too. That can't be. The whole grant request, unless there's a specific instruction to make it any longer than that, should really probably not be more than 3 or 4 pages, because the people reading these are going to have to go through a whole bunch of them. Obviously, if they say this section is 500 words, that section is 200 words, then, as I said, if it's rigid, it is what it is. But if they're leaving it up to you, try to make your point, in a fairly brief and cogent way. And the organization is very important, not just so that, it can be easily absorbed by who's ever reading it, but because a lot of the times what they do is just skim them and reject, accept, possibility, garbage. They put them at the piles and they go to the better ones later. Something that's it's just one long paragraph, instant death. Something that's not formatted correctly, instant death. Organize it well, and part of creating an outline is that you ought to put headers in. Again, I'm sorry for many of you it's belaboring the obvious. I'm sure it is, but I've seen enough proposals, across my desk that I know that for some people it's absolutely it's necessary to point it out. Headings, sections, organization, subheadings if necessary. Not more than one level of subheading, because then it starts getting too complicated. But somebody should be able to just glance at it, do the skim, and grasp what you're trying to say, and hopefully put it in the for further consideration pile. The opening paragraph is neither mission nor history. It's usually, "Hi, I'm applying to this grant request." Then you start. Our organization is, and that's basically mission. Now. We'll have an exercise that talks about mission statement. You say what it is, but then right up front, where you still hopefully got their attention, in that mission statement there needs to be a spin. That synergy that we've hopefully found before between what they want to give money for and what you're asking them for money for. That's got to be right up front and integrated into your mission. Which sometimes, that's where some creative thought is sometimes required. nothing like name dropping to get to get you someplace. Put it there, bold it. A list of recent accomplishments is very important. And now that could be an award, a citation, a proclamation. But not every organization does something that is of the nature that these things are awarded for. So it could be a successful program that you've run. It could be a measurable difference that you've made in the population that you've served. It could be another grant that you were recently awarded. As I said before, there's nothing that impresses a potential grantor than the fact that other organizations whose names they recognize have also seen fit to give you money. Now, you probably shouldn't necessarily mention the amount. I don't know if it would work against your interest to mention the amount. If you're applying for a 20,000 grant from X and Y just gave you 5,000, then you don't want to say that. You can say Y gave me money. If they say Y gave you 5,000, then X will think, well, I'll also give them 5,000. If they're happy with 5,000, I'll also give them 5,000. Obviously, this, again, as I said before, lots of common sense involved over here, in what to say and what not to say. But definitely, a list of recent accomplishments. Now, what I generally do, accomplishments, as I said, have fit into lots of different categories. If you're maintaining an up-to-date website, which is, as I said, a good idea anyway, you want to have these things on your website. So, fine, somebody's already been tasked with tracking accomplishments and logging them and putting them on the website. So for you, writing the grant proposal, it may be as easy as going to the website, cutting and pasting, copying and pasting. But otherwise, and I understand that in many organizations there aren't resources available to be so rigorous about tracking accomplishments. But as they happen, you know about them. You just forget about them a week later because you're worried about the next problem on your desk. Just keep a log, keep a separate document, accomplishments. What happened, a date, who the person in the organization is who would have the most detail about it in case you need to dig up more detail. Now, when you're writing your grant proposal, you don't just dump your list in there, but you go through it. Which of these accomplishments are relevant to the particular donor to whom I'm approaching right now. If it's that you were given a grant by recognizable name, that's pretty generally relevant. If you had success in a particular program, then that would be only relevant to another grantor who's interested in that kind of a program. Provide a moderate amount of detail. A ton of detail is not necessary. If it reaches the point that they're interested in giving you money, you'll have plenty of opportunity to probably sit down with them face to face, or at least on the phone, and explain to them in more detail, and do some bragging verbally where it's sometimes a little bit less obtrusive than actually doing a lot of bragging in writing.